Okay, boom. So here we are. Brandon Thomas Podcast number 1. I'm here with Shanyn McFadden, my first guest on the pod. How do you feel?
You know, I have no idea what to expect, especially with you, so this can go several
All right, so
ways.
this is lit. We're going to start this off with one question.
Yeah.
What do I title Brandon Thomas Podcast? Okay, so here's my dilemma, right?
Okay.
So I want it to be about me, I guess, even though none of these podcasts will be about me. So I'm thinking maybe I just want it to be named after me, which is why I'm saying Brandon Thomas Podcast. But I think that I'm going to be interviewing my friends here. I'm going to be talking about popular culture. But mostly I think it's going to be me and a friend talking about life or talking about, you know, whatever their big thing is or whatever they're dealing with. So I was thinking about something about like roses, where you're bringing people their roses while they're still alive type of deal.
Wait, for like a name or for like...
For the name of the podcast.
Okay.
Not like, yeah. Again, look, this is all in beta. I was thinking of... Okay, so I wasn't thinking of a lot, but I don't know if I just love Brandon Thomas Podcast.
Okay, well, if you want to name it after yourself, why not go off of like your Instagram handle and do like a BT It's Me?
Oh, BT is me.
You know, really just like bring everything together.
Really tie it in.
Yeah. Just what's that term called? Synergy.
Oh, synergy.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So check this out. I got a YouTube channel, right?
Okay.
And it's called Stories by Brandon Thomas.
Podcast by Brandon Thomas.
Boom. So should this just be Stories by Brandon Thomas?
I mean, if you're telling stories, then yeah. But I mean, like, if you're doing anything different, if you're doing, like... I mean, yeah. I guess everything, depending on who you would be interviewing and talking about life, there's always going to be some sort of stories, like, involved.
Yeah, I know.
So...
And so my biggest thing is, like, if you even go to my Instagram, which is BT is me, the first thing is storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that's just one of the passions of mine is, like, telling stories over, like, all forms, between writing, making movies, popping SHIT with your friends.
What do you okay, well, like, do you want people to be able to, like, differentiate between your YouTube channel and, like, a podcast? Because then maybe you should do something a little bit different. Because if you're just, like, Stories by Brandon Thomas, then, like, where are they going to know where to go?
Right.
Or how are they going to know where to go?
Okay, I got it.
Yes.
Auditory story. No, okay. Okay, that didn't flow. Go ahead. What was the rest of your thought?
Unless, in addition to doing your, like, Stories by Brandon Thomas, if you, like, did the podcast, but you also recorded and did, like, a video podcast as well.
And then I'm supposed to be making a video of this right now.
Yeah. And then you can upload that afterwards, and then you have the option of doing, like, a video podcast or just, like, the standard, like, auditory podcast, and you could call that, like, the same thing.
I just ruined everything. I'm supposed to be recording this. This is, like, podcast 1.
We're still in beta. It's fine.
Oh, my. Oh, no, hold on. Maybe I can fix this. Shannon, tell the people something about yourself while I'm setting this up. What's your favorite movie?
I really like...
Favorite 3 movies. You can't pick one.
Okay,
if you pick one,
you're
a weirdo.
August Osage County.
Oh, okay. Pick a movie somebody's heard of. Don't worry, I got you guys.
Meryl Streep was in that, so,
okay.
like...
Shout out to her, but...
really, though. And, like, Benedict Cumberbatch.
Oh,
and
wow, not Benedict.
Julia Roberts was in it. And Abigail Breslin, so it's all, like, people...
Right,
that,
she's the GOAT.
You know, yeah.
Julia Roberts is my GOAT.
I also surprisingly really like The Proposal. And, like, I'm not generally, like, a rom-com type of person, but, like, that was nice. Oh, and Green Book. Green Book was, like, one of my favorite movies of last year.
What do you mean?
I don't know, I just, like, really, really liked it. It was one of the first movies I think I've seen in a long time that was, like, 2.5 hours long, where I wasn't, like, oh my gosh, that's felt 2.5 hours long. Or,
Green Book.
Yeah. Or, like I felt like every single moment of that movie was justified. Like, there wasn't a time where I was just like, this is still going. Where, like, I feel with, like, a lot of other movies, oh, wow, my voice sounds so much different to me when I take off the hoodie.
Do you think that that's a thing?
I mean, I don't know. All things are things.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess, boom. So this is the first, I feel like I'm, like, showing off my first house. Like, this is, like, what the first podcast looks like. So we got your favorite movies. We got the camera set up.
This is true.
What else? What's your dream role?
I really want to be a spy.
Okay.
I have a lot of like dreams where I'm spies and like kind of like
Harriet the Spy? Because that
that's
was
what
lit.
everybody has said.
Right.
Or like they're just like, Shannon, I can just picture you as like in a Hardy Boys movie.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I guess like Mission Impossible style stuff. Like that's just like really cool. Because I wanted to be in the CIA for like 13 years.
Oh. So Mr. and Mrs. Smith more than...
Yeah, that too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Respectable.
What's your dream role?
Oh. So my dream role, right, is being in a classic film.
Oh.
How about that? It's two things, right? So being in a classic film that like people like watch every year or like just has like a cult following. Love and Basketball, Remember the Titans, The Matrix. You understand what I'm trying to get at? Like that type of movie where it's just kind of like people love this movie forever, or it's somebody's like favorite movie. You're like, that's your favorite, and they're like, yeah, that's my favorite. So I'm gonna go with that, or sorry, I ate McDonald's today. Judge me not. These fries are like, boy, I got something for you eating this garbage.
You sure it was the fries and not the sundae?
Well, now we're doing a tell-all. Looks like. Thanks, Shannon. So I'm gonna go with that, or being like an iconic TV dad, which would be like.
That would be awesome.
And like my favorite TV dad of all time is gonna be Michael Kyle from My Wife and Kids.
Okay.
The best. So like to play a role like that, I think that'd be my dream.
That's cool.
Totes. Okay, so wow, this podcast is happening. This podcast was made out of like. I feel like I have been doing a bunch of things. I feel like people have been like, "Oh, you should have a podcast," and I'm like, "Okay," you know what I mean, and just kind of like been okaying it, and then today I was just kind of like, "Nah, today it starts." So I literally, Shannon just so happened to be where I was, and I was like, "Come on, let's go in here and record a podcast," and she was like, "Okay," and that's what you need. You need friends to say, "Okay, let's just figure it out."
I mean, to be fair, when you're like, let's go record a podcast, I thought it was just going to be like assisting you and not being a part of it.
Oh.
So like that was a little bit of a shock to me. But you know, still here to support you.
There it is.
Whichever way I can.
Boom. That's epic. Okay, well, so the objective here was to find a name.
Yes. But like, don't all the best podcasts also have like a good like opening line or like ending a line for every single week?
Yes.
I mean, I wouldn't know. I've really only been listening to a lot of like NPR podcasts lately.
Okay. Yeah. I don't listen to any of those, so that's great. Yeah, I think they got a jingle in the front. They got
Can you please like sing your own jingle?
Maybe.
Or, like,
I can't
rap
afford
your own
somebody
jingle?
else to do one. But you need a name. Like I'm pretty sure if I was rapping a intro, it's gonna be the name in it. You know?
That's true. What if you like started like right in your little like opening, and then like the name just like came to you during that?
But then we're gonna be on podcast number 2, and I don't have a steady name. Like you can't leave the hospital before you name your baby. I can't leave the hospital.
Funny story.
Okay.
I have a friend who, when she was born, they like didn't really give her a name. So for the first like 5 years of her life until she was like adopted, she was just baby girl. Like her birth certificate was just baby girl.
Okay.
Yeah.
That feels like a really sad story. I am not touching that. No deal. Okay. Here Are Your Roses with Brandon Thomas.
But like...
Okay.
Just like walk me through this whole like rose thing again.
Okay, so they say like... There's like a saying, it's like, give people their roses while they can smell them. Meaning like, if you like something or somebody, you're supposed to tell them before they're gone. Because when people die, there's always like this big thing, and they're like, oh, why didn't you tell them when they were alive? Because you think people are going to live forever. And I'm not necessarily saying that you're going to get on this podcast and then die shortly after. But what I'm saying is that I think...
God, I hope not.
Yeah, no, that'd be terrible. But I think it's more so saying is like appreciating people while they're in the midst of it. So I don't necessarily have to name it roses or anything that has roses in it, but I definitely want to do that. I definitely want to honor these folks in the middle of their thing. And I think it's like everything doesn't have to be the most honorable, if that makes sense. Like, and that isn't the right verbiage. Not everything doesn't have to be honorable, but I think it's like an issue of like, you don't have to be curing cancer to be acknowledged for the greatness that you're doing.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like just accepting and being proud of people exactly where they are in their growth or in their forward progression, I think can be like a cool thing. So I kind of want to wait for that, where I think a lot of times like people aren't happy, especially us as actors, right? Mm-hmm. Until you book a series or you book a movie, nobody really cares. You know what I mean? Or like it might be, or the care or like the pat on the back that you may want, and not that you need, but you may want, isn't going to come until those things happen. So what if we created a different culture of being proud of people still on the way? Or like, yo, like, you're progressing. That's great. Congratulations on progressing. Congratulations on not quitting. Congratulations on continuing to strive for said goal.
So basically, like the corny thing that people always say about it, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. So more about celebrating the journey than like where people want to get.
Yeah, because I think everybody's on a journey regardless to like, you know, what they're doing, you know, unless, and again, I don't think anybody really, I think the trick is that nobody ever really like arrives, you know what I mean, at the destination, but I just think it's like where you are in the trip. And I think me telling my story, you telling your story could relate to somebody who has a similar story, or can reach out to somebody, or can touch somebody who has passed where you are and they may be able to reach back to you, or vice versa, where you know, you hear somebody and you can reach back to them.
Yeah.
But until we talk about it, I don't know if we exactly know.
I mean, I like that better than the roses.
Okay.
Something along those lines.
Okay, well, maybe I can put that 5 minutes in the title.
I feel like we can condense it into something good.
Okay. The Journey with Brandon Thomas.
Along the journey, throughout the journey. Something the journey.
A Walk to Remember. No, that ends poorly? Okay. Yeah, no, see, and I have a motivational email series, and it's called The Long Text, which feels close, but it's just not quite. It's different. Yeah. It's different. I think I kind of like the journey.
The long chat. No, that sounded so much better in my head.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Ooh,
yeah, let's just...
There. Okay. Ooh. Yeah. I think I like the journey. Mm-hmm. Book it. Okay, well, look at that. I think we settled this. P number 1. Mm-hmm. Welcome to The Journey with Brandon Thomas. Boom. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you, Brandon.
Boom.
Always a pleasure.
Indeed. Where can they find you on social?
Shanyn McFadden. It's SHANYN McFadden on pretty much all of them.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And then now, next time that we got this out of the way, we can get you in for a proper interview.
Yes.
It's going to be mad festive.
By then, I'm going to have some really good things to talk about.
It could be tomorrow, so... God bless.